You're tuned into the It's Real podcast with your hosts, Kayla Calendar and Andrew Yagi. Each week, we'll talk about what happens behind the scenes working full-time in real estate and share with you real-life stories, our successes and failures as we work to help consumers and industry professionals reach their real estate and real-life goals. Here we go.
It's episode 60 of the It's Real podcast. I'm Kayla Calendar, and I'm a mortgage lender.
And I'm Andrew Yagi. I'm a real estate agent.
Hi, Andrew Yagi. How are you today?
I'm doing swell, Kayla. How are you?
Oh, I love that word, swell. I'm neat.
You're neat. Wow.
I feel like it was an underused word like yours.
We'll take it. What's going on this week with Kayla Calendar?
Oh my gosh, let me pull up Kayla Calendar's calendar to see. This week, well, it's a busy week. We're seeing a little bit of slowdown with, people buying, but that doesn't mean we stop as lenders and human beings. So this week we've got the fun, exciting Homeward Animal Shelter. This is near and dear to my heart as a board member. But this week we have our annual Wags, Whiskers, and Wine event. So that's fun.
Our animal, is that like a gala of sorts?
It's a gala of sorts. Yes. It's basically kind of come and go as you want. It's at the Hilton this year. Maybe there'll be some animals, but essentially all proceeds go to Homeward Animal Shelter. We are now going to be building a new facility. So we are taking all the, help we can get to do that. So it's a Mad Hatter theme, food, drinks, prizes, games, supporting the local shelter and rehoming and rescuing animals in our community. So that's on Friday. So that's exciting.
Awesome.
I'll be there. So if you want to come to Fargo, Andy, come on down.
And is it like gala number 2 of like 59?
Yeah, 58. But yeah, it's gala season. Lots going on. The FM Wine and Dine is November 8th. So that's a big one too. And then I just feel like it's already going to be November soon. Like, where has this year gone? And why haven't rates come down further, right?
Well, we'll get to that. And since you're the mortgage meteorologist, everybody is wanting to hear, because rates are not going in the right direction and just hit not a very good milestone according to the info I have in front of me. But
I hear you.
We'll get to that. But yeah, I would say that, this time of year, obviously things are getting slow and exceptionally, quiet out there in the market. But as far as fun things, I don't know that we have anything planned other than, just kind of getting into the season of life with kids that are getting very busy with activity. We don't even have time, anymore to get up to a Bison game for tailgating. Did you go to the game this last weekend? Are you still a trusty Bison fan or not really?
Once a Bison, always a Bison, right? Like that's just in our blood. But we've been at the lake so much. It's just so beautiful. And the weather's been great. The dogs can get out and play. And I don't know if you get to the lake much in the fall, Andy, but this time of year, what I love is that the water is still warmer and the air is so crisp and cold that it creates this like steam and fog. And it's just so quiet and beautiful that you just want to get out there. So no Bison games this year for me, but cheering from afar. But if I'm home in Fargo, I will attend them for sure.
We were just talking over the weekend. We made it out to Otter Tail Lake. My grandpa on my mom's side, he celebrated 85 years. So we celebrated his birthday. And complete with a fireball shot. He's big into the fireball. So we had a great time out there and, picked up some last minute outdoor furniture pieces. But you're right, it was really, really a beautiful weekend and nice to get together with family. In fact, I there's kind of a housing tie into this. So my mom had kind of a sheet printed off back in 1939 when he was born. And so back in 1939, 85 years ago, Kayla, do you know what a new house sold for?
Oh my gosh. I'm going to be so wrong. Gosh, I want to say like $2,000, but maybe that's going to be super small. I have no idea.
You're close. $4,000 for a new house.
Wow. Isn't that nuts?
Average annual income per year?
$500.
$1,730. So they had kind of this sheet that showed, like a new car, $750. A gallon of gas was 10 cents, 3 cents for a stamp. Movie ticket, 23 cents. I was giving some of my younger cousins a hard time because I said, you probably don't know what a movie theater is, but But
But if Trump gets back into office, I wouldn't be surprised if we got kind of closer to that.
are you playing favorites, Kayla, or just
I'm just stating facts. But I love seeing that because it just puts things in perspective. And I think a lot of people too, they're like, well, when my parents bought, they said, mortgage rates were 18%, but what was the cost of a home then? And I think that puts that in perspective as it cost how much then, but what was the annual income? You got to take all things into consideration. So.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it was kind of eye-opening. And I guess, we just don't think about, 10 years ago, sometimes, let alone 85 years ago. So kind of interesting. But you're right. We do have some challenges kind of in the US, which obviously we'll talk about among other things. So, Kayla, everyone, is kind of curious, or if they're watching, if they're out house hunting, rates a month ago, national average about 6.08%, or right when the Fed cut mortgage rates did not go down. We've talked about why. Rates have gone back up, but Kayla, what are rates sitting at today?
The average 30-year fixed is hovering right around 7% today. And for those kind of viewing with us versus listening, you're going to see it's up a little bit. Whenever we show this graph from mortgagenewsdaily.com, it's an average of national just lenders. It's not necessarily your lender, bank, credit union, mortgage bank, etc. But what you can see is it's up a bit. That 0.1, that red means it's up. A 30-year FHA is at almost 6.5. And so when we were looking at last month, more so at the beginning of September, before the Feds even cut rates, we were seeing, there were some options for high fives if you were buying down the rate. So yes, what you're showing here, 6.09 we were at. And I know some people, there were some options that if you wanted to pay down to get, a lower rate, you could pay points, the cost for a lower rate. And now we're back up again. So if you look back at that graph, that 7% is hanging out where we were months ago. Yes, in general, though, rates are down from where they were when we looked a year ago. But, again, it's that conversation of when will rates come down to 3% again? When will rates come down to 4%? And I think the idea is that we're probably past the 3 and 4% interest rate days. We probably are. And I think it's more important now than ever to kind of just acknowledge that. And if you truly feel like home ownership is for you and you want to create wealth through home ownership and create equity, like at my closing today, we said to the clients and they said back, what else can you purchase that creates money for you? I can't buy, we were talking about an ice house or an ice castle, a car, a computer, like clothing. These things don't appreciate like real estate. So the consumer really has to be okay with knowing like, here's where I'm really at now, 6%, 5%, 7% in this range. Am I comfortable? And if you are, you got to almost just be okay with it and accept it. It's kind of how I felt. I think the numbing is kind of worn off. Like people were like, it's going to change. I feel like people are kind of grasping like this is the new reality.
Sure.
How do you feel about that? Do you feel like consumers are still saying, I really want to wait until rates come down before I buy? What are you seeing from sellers? What are you experiencing in terms of interest rates and what the consumers are saying?
Well, I think as a whole, Kayla, we know seasonally things get slow in the fall. There's not a huge issue with inventory. We've talked, kind of numbers a couple of episodes ago, and probably in one of our next episodes, we'll have the final numbers out for October so we can jump back in and look at some stats and kind of see what did the market do in the month of October. But I think as a whole, there's so much noise and so many headwinds out there that are causing confusion and I think some fear out there too. And we'll get into it today. The Wall Street Journal over the weekend just put out an article talking about how home sales are on track for the worst year since 1995. Last year was the worst year before that, but this year's even worse. And I share that not to cause panic or not to preach doom and gloom, but just to be frank. But there still are ways to win, and we still have clients that are out there that are winning, that are reaching their goals, and we'll talk about that a little bit today too. But I think the rates are very challenging. You mix that with the election. And just a lot of economic uncertainty out there, especially I look at being in such a agrarian region here where we rely so much on agriculture. I was talking to a lender the other day, and they were talking about how big into ag, how about 40% of the farms that they work with are in kind of tough shape financially. So I think that puts a strain on everything.
Yeah, it really does. And I think too, it's like, so many individuals, they're just really not sure what to do or expect. And so a lot of people they stay where they're at. They just say, I'm not going to make a decision. But one of the things I focus on, and Andy, I think you focus on this too, is education, empowerment, and empathy. And I think that we in the industry need to have empathy for those that are scared, those that are fearful from what they hear on the news. But we also have to be these thought leaders, these individuals that are educating people. Sitting at a closing this morning, the closer said something. He's like, I didn't know that about interest rates. He sees closing packages every day, but that doesn't mean he understands how, removing escrow off of your mortgage, impacts your rate. So I say that because it's really easy for everyone in our industry to be like, buy a house, go do this. But we really need to educate, empower, and have some empathy for our clients because it's emotional for them.
For sure. Mm-hmm. Kayla, you shared kind of the national averages out there. What about North Dakota housing? What have you seen there?
I'm glad you asked. I pulled this up today for a client. So we're seeing this up about a quarter from where they were. So if you are a first-time home buyer, you're going to see rates between roughly 5 and 6%. If you're a repeat buyer or you make over a certain income amount, you're going to see rates between 7 and 8%. So the North Dakota Roots Start program, that's if you're a repeat buyer or you make over a certain income threshold. It's dependent on county and how many people are in your home. But you could be seeing 7.75 to 8% on a conventional loan. So you're getting down payment assistance, but you're paying for it with a higher rate. So there was a time where we saw that in the low 7s, and now it's back up to that high 7, low 8.
Sure. Well, thanks for sharing that. Well, Kayla, I want to jump in and I want to talk about kind of, this Wall Street Journal article, which I think, does a good job of, kind of talking overall, about the market, about everything that we're seeing out there. Let me get it here.
That was a very interesting article, but it's interesting because it's like, why? The consumers are wondering why, but the worst year since 95. Like, why is that?
Yeah, so September sales fell 3.5% from a year earlier. So just when we thought, things couldn't get worse in the housing market. So in 2023, home sales hit their lowest point in 30 years, and we're going to top that this year. So obviously, it talks about, probably the biggest cause is persistently high home prices and elevated mortgage rates are keeping potential home buyers on the sidelines. Mm-hmm. And Kayla, so much so, like I just put a house on the market that we flipped here in our office, and it very attractively priced under $150,000, a cute little 2-bedroom, 1-bath, really well updated and maintained. Doesn't have a garage, but we've had about 10 showings. Did have one somewhat lower offer on the house. And I've had a couple of other individuals, agents, when I said, we're maybe getting an offer in, their potential buyers chose not to look at it. And then I followed up with them and they turned around and said, oh no, both of these agents both said, oh, the buyer's going to wait until spring. And so I look at, again, even fast forwarding from the end of last week where rates were maybe a little bit more hospitable to this week where, oh boy, national average things really hit. Combined that with higher home prices, I can see why it's keeping people on the sidelines.
And it's the devil, right? Like they might not be interested in keeping, their apartment, and they might hate their upstairs neighbor's sounds, and they might have a dog. Like it's the devil they know. And so that's what they choose because it's that certainty. And I see that a lot, and I don't blame clients at all. I'm the same way with many things in my life. It's the devil, but a lot of individuals, I think, are doing that because they're like, well, my payment will be lower. It'll be more affordable. But we both know what can happen in that competition. Even I think the national sales price of a home after an election, what that goes up every year, that's a concern as well. So it's going to cost them more in price, maybe less in interest rate, but it kind of weighs out. The only downside is you're going to have more competition.
Right, without a doubt. I really I don't know how much you follow the National Association of Realtors, but they have a chief economist, Lawrence Yun, who who talks quite a bit, and he was quoted in this article talking about home sales are stuck at low levels. Americans are not really moving. He said he forecasts that existing home sales for 2024 as a whole could match or be slightly below last year's level. And I think, we're seeing that in what we've seen so far in the graph up above. Expectations that the Fed would cut rates this year caused mortgage rates to drop to 6.08% in September, which is a 2-year low, but it came too late to lure in buyers. Agents say. What do you see with that? Do you think a lot of buyers think it's, too late in the season to be buying?
I think that they just aren't ready. They're not mentally ready, a lot of buyers, but the ones that are, like the ones that I'm taking time to educate and really dive in, like if they're okay, like spending, this higher rate's going to cost you $115 more a month. Are you okay with that? Like they're up a bit. If they're okay, they're moving forward. But I think that there is a little bit of a disconnect because a lot of sellers are not willing to give up their 3.5% rate to take a 6-7% rate. So I think inventory is still an issue. We've seen a lot of newer construction. So that's been helpful in Fargo, North Dakota. That's not everywhere, obviously, but I still think there's a little bit of issue when clients are ready. They can't find the right home, or maybe they are waiting for that perfect home to come on. And it really comes down to, you have to opportunities may be passing you by as a buyer because you're waiting for the perfect rate, the perfect home, the perfect scenario. And I'm seeing that with a few of my clients.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So,
Gotcha.
But time will tell.
Time will tell indeed. Kayla, this article goes on to talk a little bit about, the fact that we did have a reprieve in rates, but it didn't last long. Mortgage rates have risen for 3 straight weeks to the highest level, and they've risen even since this article went up. Another agent here quoted, the trickle up in rates back to right where we are just sucked the air out. And I think I'm seeing that with some buyers too that are sitting. I mean, if they're not committed to doing something by now, they're not really making a move. I really like the article, Kayla, here, where it kind of shows the correlation between the 10-year Treasury note, and kind of talks about this and how really this is what mortgage rates, are really tied to, and that's how they trend. Just because, again, I think we've seen a lot of confusion in the market with a lot of different buyers thinking, again, why did rates not drop when the Fed dropped rates?
Mm-hmm. And I think that was a big misconception, is the conversation was rates are dropping. What the consumer didn't understand, or certain industry professionals didn't understand, was that didn't say mortgage rates were dropping. And so now that rates have been coming up, there is this confusion. I thought rates were dropping. I'm still seeing industry professionals that are not mortgage lenders sharing that rates have dropped. They've dropped. But, and although they have, compared to where we were a year ago, it's not as big of a difference as it was, as we saw back in September. And so when clients come to us and they're like, well, I heard rates are at their lowest, they're at 6.08. Well, in reality, they're at 7. There's just this kind of confusion because there's, like you said earlier, Andy, just so much noise. And the Fed cutting rates, I think, was kind of noise. And consumers are just more shocked because they weren't educated.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think at a certain point, we are going to see rates, drop. I think we have to see them come back down again. 3 or 4% isn't practical. But, if we see it late this year, that would be welcome in addition to next spring. I think the market's going to be better. Next year, it's going to be more competitive for buyers as more re-enter the market, but hopefully more affordable. But that could also be offset if home prices continue to rise, which I think that is going to be the case, especially as inventory is not exceptionally high anywhere in the nation. And one really interesting thing, Kayla, here in kind of the tie-in. So I asked you at the beginning, talking about my grandpa's birthday 85 years ago, a home on average was $4,000. What is the median existing home price in the U.S. today?
Ooh. The challenge is real. 439,912.
You're close, Kayla. It's 404,500. That was 3% up from the year earlier. So it's down a little bit from the recent high. It's the highest median home price for any September we've ever seen. But I mean, look at that. Look at how drastic home prices are up, compared to
Yeah,
85 years ago.
it's a different game. And I think the average age of a first-time home buyer is 35 years old. And when we look at, I would love to see a graph of that. I should have had that, but what it used to be. And I mean, when we were in our 20s, and which was just like last year, when we were in our 20s, I mean, we were all buying houses at 25 to 28 to 30. And now I feel like it's not uncommon if I see a 40-year-old or 45-year-old be a first-time home buyer.
How,
It's like,
how old were you when you bought your first house?
I was 26.
Okay. And what was I?
12.
I was 25. Mhm.
Okay. You were also like selling stocks in college in classrooms. So I feel like you were also ahead of the curve.
That's when I came to class. We were talking at my grandpa's birthday this weekend and sitting there and talking about the NDSU, talking about buys and games. And my grandparents always used to go tailgate and go with friends, except they're just saying, they're like, all of our friends are dead. We've outlived so many of them, and which I think is going to be the reality. I mean, for most of us at some point or another, but we were talking about NDSU and just kind of the value of education, which I won't get deep into, but I pretty much went to NDSU to work full time and to go out and meet people and go to the bars. So that must have been a pretty rare time that you saw me in class, Kayla.
Oh my gosh. Remember that like guy that used to be on his unicycle all the time? Remember that guy?
I do remember the unicycle guy.
I feel like that was always entertainment.
It was. Kayla, I want to jump back to, talking about housing a little bit.
Mhm.
And okay, so a lot of people are looking at this and they're saying, wow, yep, that just really confirms that the market sucks. I don't want to be in the market right now. I don't want to sell my house. I don't want to go and buy a house.
Mhm.
But realistically, there are options for people out there. What advice would you give someone who's buying or who is in the market? Like how to succeed?
I'm again back to the 3 E's: that education, empowerment, and empathy. Make sure you're aligned with professionals that have a history, that have Google reviews, that talk about their experience with other individuals of consumers, because you need to have all three from your lender and your realtor, because it's tricky, right? There's so much noise, like we talked about. So having in-depth conversations, you should not be getting a loan estimate from a lender without talking to them about your goals and how much down you can have. And like we talk about with these rates, there's different levels of income based on the program you qualify for. So make the time as a buyer, especially a buyer, make the time to be educated and to absorb the information. And hopefully your team of realtor lender partners also empowering you and sharing the good parts about owning. I would never talk into buying a house just to buy a house. Like we talk about, what is the average appreciation that you're going to gain on this property? Oh, the appraisal came in high. What does that mean? The ability to use your this new asset as future, to maybe do a HELOC or to take out the money and roll it into an investment. Like education, empowerment, and empathy, knowing that the consumers, you shouldn't know everything. That's where you have your team of professionals. So I would just say align yourself with those right people, be willing to be educated, feel empowered, and make sure that there's like this sense of empathy with your partners, because you shouldn't know it all. And also, one other thing is, when you see an interest rate, ask, what is that going to cost me? Because if you see a lower rate, it's generally going to cost you something, meaning like fees versus a higher rate. Not always, but ask that question, because it's really easy to get sold on, hey, rates are 5.5 right now. We just saw they're roughly at about 7. What's it going to cost you out of pocket for that? So that's just kind of my advice based on what I've seen, especially in the last month.
Mm-hmm.
What about you?
Well, I think if you're in the market to buy right now, the advice that I would give you is that, well, number one, it's got to make sense. Like, if you don't have to move, don't move. But if it makes sense and it's something you want to do, absolutely do it. And the reasons being is that we're seeing buyers get some pretty awesome deals, being able to negotiate, a fair amount off of list price or perhaps some concessions, really favorable terms. So I think those are all huge positives for those that are looking to buy. Also, the fact that because not a lot of buyers are out, there's not as much competition. If you're looking to sell your house, obviously I would say sell your house if it makes sense, if it's going to help you reach your goals, if you're looking to relocate. Obviously, if there's a death or divorce or other life circumstance, it's probably something you have to do. I would say if you don't have to do it, or if you're not in a position where you have to sell your home, maybe it does make sense to sit on the sidelines and wait, unless you have a home that's super desirable and that's really, really ready to go and that's priced right. If you fit one of those three boxes, I think it's a great time to sell a house. But if not, the spring market may be a little bit better for you. But I would just say reach out to an agent of your choice. And even if you do have to turn around and buy, visit with a lender as well, and just kind of talk scenarios, because I think it can work out favorably whether you're looking to buy or sell, provided you have good guidance and you approach the market with a practical mindset.
Well, I think conversations don't cost you anything but some time. And if you're not willing to invest in time for one of your biggest purchases or sales, then that's where you may get hurt as a consumer. Is take the time, just have the conversations, and the right team that you align yourself with will have as many conversations as possible to make you feel comfortable.
I would say even the same thing, Kayla, about investors. I think are geared a little bit more towards the consumer out there, but even for investors that are looking, I've had a lot of people that buy rental properties that say, I'm sitting on the sidelines, so rates come down, rates are too high, the cash flow is not great. And I would encourage those individuals to look at it through the glass of dollar cost averaging, meaning that, hey, I might have, a property over here at 4%. And, maybe I'm over here looking at one and it's going to cost me 6%, let's average that. And we've got a 5% average, just use easy numbers.
Yeah.
And so looking at it through that, and again, keeping your eye on the price of the long-term capital appreciation is really
it's huge. It's important. And just knowing your numbers and how it impacts you, that's incredibly important.
Speaking of numbers, Kayla, I would, we've talked about it a little bit in past episodes, and it kind of jogged my memory as I was talking to a banker friend of mine on Friday, just in passing, about rates and the housing market overall, and just consumer debt, and just how we're seeing a lot more consumer debt. And like we talked last time, we've seen a lot of people who don't want to give up that low rate, even though they may be drowning or have significant consumer debt in the form of credit cards, vehicle loans, and the like. And I had talked to this particular lender, and he had said, people just do not seem to be bothered by the rates on some of this debt. But, when it comes to mortgage rates, they just are very unwilling to give up that low rate. So I want you to talk on that just a little bit.
Isn't it funny? Like, you don't see a lot of people like media headlines talking about interest rates on credit cards. It's all, I feel like, driven by the media. But here's an example of somebody that I spoke to. This is what's called a blended rate calculator. So these clients came to me and they said, hey, can we do a HELOC or can we refi? We don't want to get rid of our, as you see on debt 8, the very bottom there, we don't want to get rid of our 3.5% rate. That seems just silly. Why would we do that? So I had them send me all of their debt. We didn't pull credit or do an application. I just said, just tell me, what is your debt that you have, the interest rate, and your balance and monthly payment. So I plugged in all of their numbers. As you can see here, look at these interest rates, Andy: 23, 21, 20, 27, 24, 22. Then there's a 3.99 with a small 1,800, and then their mortgage at 3.5. Their blended rate is 6.846. All of their equity is tied up in their house. So what can we do? So I did the math for them, and I said, okay, if we were to do a refinance and we basically took out money from, your equity, if we plugged that in, we were saving them about $1,000 roughly or more in monthly cash flow. Now, depending how much they wanted to do, if they want to keep some in their pocket, essentially they're paying $46.86 in a monthly payment, right? If I plug that same $378,296, the amount that they owe, in a 30-year fixed, their payment was actually a little bit more than that. It was about $2,500. So we're saving people money by putting them in a 30-year fixed. Yeah, we don't have 3.5% today, but if we plug them in at 6.875, those shorter term debts, we're seeing people in car loans at 4-year car loans at 24%, and they're not batting an eye. And so they're looking at their cash flow. And again, it comes down to that education piece. These clients are going to save a ton of money because I'm going to likely refinance them, take the equity, the cash out, pay off all of that high interest debt. They're going to have a higher house payment than they do, but their cash flow is going to be so much lower because they're getting rid of that higher debt. That's just never talked about.
And why isn't it, I think back to my lending experiences, and most mortgage lenders seem to be more, along the lines of an order taker, and, well, this is what I want and just give it to me. And how is the consumer really supposed to be knowledgeable? Which, again, going back even to your agent example earlier, where, a local agent came to you and said, hey, I just need a pre-qualification, or I just need an estimate for this particular client. How can, it almost seems like malpractice without looking at the full picture.
I love what you say. Prescription without diagnosis is malpractice. And that's the thing, is like, I don't know where we lost people in that it's click a button, get a mortgage. This is the biggest purchase or sale that you will ever have. And I did a reel the other day, you probably saw it. I'm like, you wouldn't go to your doctor and just, a doctor would say, hey, I'm going to prescribe you this without them asking any questions. I had a really bad back issue last week. I went to the doctor and I was asked like 87 questions. They ask the questions so that they can best diagnose and prescribe me, right? So yes, that's your health. But when it comes to the biggest purchase of your life, the where you live and where you have most of your memories and where most of your cash is tied up, why aren't consumers taking the time to ask questions and be asked questions? Why are you taking a rate from a lender and a payment from a lender when they didn't ask, what are you comfortable putting down? Do you want down payment assistance? Well, let's do an application to make sure you're qualified for that program. And so to me, I don't know where we got lost with consumers just, going online. I really do think that there's just been a lot of advertisements, media, et cetera, saying, hey, here's the rates and get pre-approved fast. But we industry professionals need to all be on the same page that the more time that you take to understand the process, the better the result that you will have. What do you think about that, Andy?
Yeah, no, I think it's right on. Obviously we have a lot of conversations with consumers when they're selling, also when they're buying, except we don't get very deep into the financial side just because it's not our wheelhouse.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't prescribe anything for that. I can refer people to good, competent, lenders or other professionals for, a varying number of services. But yeah, no, I think it's great. I think it's spot on. And I hope that there are some individuals that see this and are like, wow, like this would solve a lot of my problems if I could, pay off all of this other high interest debt. And yep, it's going to raise my mortgage rate. But really, I can see the forest through the trees. And I know that this is going to be a positive for my long-term financial future.
Well, and I think about it too, from a realtor side, it's like, you're not going to send listings to somebody that needs, 4 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms in this neighborhood. You're going to ask the questions like, what do you need? What do you want? What are your 5 big things? Like a realtor shouldn't be sending just random listings to Kayla in Fargo for Fergus Falls, right? Like, you're going to do your due diligence as a realtor, and same with an insurance agent. They should be asking the questions too. Like, do you want to combine autos? What kind of coverage do you want? Like, everything that costs money or takes time or is a big asset or investment, we really have to slow down as professionals and as consumers to understand our options.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Well, Kayla, I think that's a lot of great information, a little bit of doom and gloom, and hopefully a little bit of hope for everybody out there who is in the market or maybe will be in the market, if not this fall, next year, next spring. And as always, if anybody out there is seeing this and this resonates, feel free to reach out to either of us. We would love to chat more with you.
We would. Keep us posted.
So, well, Kayla, I think that puts a wrap on episode 60. So great connecting as always, and have a great week.
I will if you will.
See ya.
Bye.